Moving on to group exercises. Again, I know this is one area that is particularly daunting to candidates, mainly because I don't think they've had the opportunity to practice them in the past. What type of group exercises are the most commonly used at the moment in graduate recruitment? Are people still building towers from paper?
Yes. I mean, I remember doing that with and not just with graduates. But and the reason we'd get people to do things like that is because we're just thinking about how people work effectively as a team. But it's a bit false. It's not the sort of thing that you're likely to do. So often we'll set people on a task related to the job. So if somebody's looking for a communications job, it's maybe how you would put how you would put something together related to that. So, you know, how you would put a short internal video together and get people working on something. So it could be something to do with that. It could be something that we call assigned roles. So everybody gets a brief to prepare in advance, and you go in there as, you know, working from some department. So you have to be able to use your brief rather than just the information that you've got in your head. You're probably not going to know in advance what the assessment centre is going to be about, although I think there's various websites like Student Room that should be able to provide some information from people that have recently gone through. But you've just got to be ready for anything that you're throwing. Key thing with a group exercise is you need to speak up. And, you know, not everybody's highly extrovert. Some people are quite quiet. But you can have masses of good ideas, but if you don't speak up, me as an assessor wouldn't know about these ideas in your head. So you have to speak up, and you probably have to speak up more than you would normally. But equally, you don't want to take over, because just speaking and trying to come across well yourself at the expense of other people, well, as assessors, we don't like that either.
I know when I've been an assessor in group exercises, as you mentioned, there's been candidates that I've been looking at, and they've not said a word in the entire 45 minutes or half hour. And you know, how can you give them marks to go through if they don't speak?
No, and you can't make a judgment. Some assessment centres will get people to review their performance afterwards, but still, you know, saying, "Oh, I wish I'd said this," is not actually given us as assessors evidence, because that's what we're doing, whether we're looking at the group exercise, a role play, an interview. We're gathering evidence that we can compare against our competency framework. So you need to provide information for us to be able to make a judgment.
What are the roles that people can take on in the group exercise to make sure that they get noticed?
I mean, something I always used to do, because I've been through masses of assessment centres as a candidate myself, and you know, I was very shy when I was younger, but I could write neatly, so I would often offer to be the scribe and to write things at the flip chart. So if that's a possibility, and you write neatly, and you're good at listening and summarising, that's something you could do, because as you're saying, can I just confirm that this is what you want me to capture? At least you're speaking up. The other thing is to take on a timekeeping role. There's often a stopwatch on the table or there's a clock around the room. But if you do it, you have to do it properly. So many of the time, somebody says, "I'll be the timekeeper," and then they never give a time check. So again, it's something that it's good because it's a role that you can play. Now, you might not want to be at the flip chart because you feel like you can't contribute. So you've got to think about what plays best to your strengths. But always thinking about people that are quieter, at least that's a good thing that you can do. But also, you get the people in a group exercise, and you've probably noticed this yourself, that are very keen to speak up. And they forget about everybody else in the group exercise. So what we need to do is if you find that somebody's doing that, you can say something like, "Well, we've heard a lot about you, but what about some of the more quieter people?" Even if you're one of the more quieter people yourself, you could say, like, "Denise, what's your views? We've not heard much about what you've had to say." And then, you know, then you're bringing in somebody who might be even quieter than you are.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point about the scribe. I always find that that's a really good role to take on, because you then tend to be stood up whilst everybody else in the group is sat down. So you almost naturally just develop more of a dominant position, and you can start then to bring in other people.
Yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't catch that. What was that? Or did I capture this? What you said correctly? And as you said, you can naturally adopt the role of, you know, bringing in the the quieter members of the team to say, Barry, what's you've not mentioned much. What do you think about this?
Absolutely, and some assessment centres, it's quite complex, the topics that's discussed, and you might feel a bit overwhelmed by the amount of data. So if you're more facilitative, the assessors will probably notice that it's less on content and more on process, but it still means that you're getting quite a lot of airtime out there. And people will look at you as a more of a leadership position. And at that point, but you need to take it on. And so when you find out that James isn't saying very much, James is taking over, it's a bit like, James, we keep hearing your point of view, and we know you've got lots of good ideas, but shall we just hear what everybody else has got to say? And that's quite a good thing, about being a bit more assertive as well.
Definitely, and I like your point about the timekeeper. I think I've seen that quite a few times. People are told to, go in and adopt the role of the timekeeper. So they fight to say, I'll be the timekeeper, but then it's somebody else who says, hey guys, we've got 5 minutes left. Should we actually try and answer the question?
Yeah, and I think for everybody in a group exercise, write down the time. I know a lot of people don't wear watches now, and going to assessment centre, dig your watch out, because you can't keep looking at your phone, because often they ask you to turn them off, but you've got to keep on pressing it to get the time to come up. So dig out your retro watch from your drawer and write it down, so that even if somebody is keeping track of time, they might not be doing a very good job, and at least you can see how things go. So, for example, if the exercise is 50 minutes for the group exercise, then if they're still talking about process and how they're going to work after 10 minutes, it's like, we need to move on. So just because somebody has said that they're going to do the timekeeping role, you don't have to rely on them. You can demonstrate some capabilities with that as well.
You mentioned talking over people as a trait that people shouldn't be doing. Are there any other common pitfalls that people need to avoid? So don't overtalk is one. Speak up is another one. Keep focused on the task, because I think there's the overtalking and then there's just speaking. I don't want to hear a load of stuff that isn't adding value to the group exercise, because as an assessor, it's like, well, what was the point of that? Yes, lots of airtime, but it wasn't very relevant. So what you say should be relevant. And again, that's something that you can do with saying to other people, saying, oh, I'm not quite sure how that relates to the topics that we're discussing. Perhaps you could let us know. So that's a good way to tackle it when somebody else is just saying too much. But also monitor your own performance. Now, I know I'm saying there's an awful lot that you've got to be doing. So, and if you're not the sort of person that's had much experience of getting involved in groups, and has this fear about a group exercise, well, look about how you can practice. Think about when you're at university and the groups that you've been involved with, and start treating that in a bit more of a slightly formalised way, where you act as if you're at a group exercise. And maybe if you're playing rugby and you go along to committee meetings, again, that you speak up and you start pretending that you're in a group exercise. Well, you are in a group discussion, but start talking about bringing other people in, because that's going to help you to feel more relaxed about what's coming up. Definitely.